There are basically 3 levels of karma to speak of. I'm going to discuss these levels individually, but they all tie together, obviously. And there is also what you might call a bonus karma, for especially designed for this incarnation. It might be used other places, but it's definitely used at this time for reasons I will get into. But the 3 main levels of karma is individual, group, and collective. And I'll start with the individual level because that's the most important anyway. That's the one you can do the most about. So basically, karma is something you, as your higher mind or higher self or full self in 5D before you incarnate, you agree upon taking on a certain theme or certain themes for your life, which will be the challenges that you have to go through and hopefully overcome to get back and find back to your true self in physical incarnation, which is called enlightenment. So this karma is kind of self-imposed in that sense because you are in agreement with it. But of course, the being you become as a physical incarnated being is not have no memory of that, and it can be seen in one perspective as being innocent because it's never done anything except having this life, but still it has to take on a lot of karma and transmute a lot of negativity. But that's just the nature of the game. So what happens is that the higher mind decides what it wants to explore, what kind of theme it wants to explore, and then it makes connections to simultaneous parallel incarnations because everything goes on at the same time. So these parallel incarnations can be both past, present, and future relative to the current life. And these connections, some of them are not so strong, or they don't affect the current life so much, and you have like a handful perhaps of more dominant incarnations that will actually have a bigger impact on the current life. But that comes in addition to what the default karma that everybody who incarnates on Earth will have to take on no matter what. And that is what I've discussed in 3 previous videos called the birth and the death of the ego. Because nobody who is born in this negative realm can escape the default core issue or core trauma, which I call a rejection trauma. Because basically the baby is wide open, unconditional love and extremely sensitive. So it will absorb the slightest negativity in the air, so to speak, and from the parents' unconscious minds and the surroundings and the mass consciousness. So this, and even the slightest negativity is interpreted by the baby like a rejection, basically. And there is more than just slight negativity, because the way we treat babies, usually they're ripped from their mothers and placed in plastic beds staring up into artificial lights. That's the first meeting with life, right? Isolated like that and not with the mother. And if they're born too early or whatever is complications, they're usually placed in incubators, which is even worse because there's even more isolation. And, with tubes sticking out. This actually happened to me, so I know a thing or two about it. But anyway, that negativity and the first meeting with life and not being with the mother, and then the mother is herself have a lot of negativity and traumas and issues in her unconscious mind herself, and then the father also and other people around, and everything that adds up to what becomes a pretty strong, almost psychotic, or basically a psychosis at the center of your being, a rejection trauma that becomes like a stronghold of darkness that's basically represses and diminishes the light of awareness and the true center and the true beingness that is the real identity of anybody or everybody. So this stronghold of darkness and negativity and this trauma becomes the center of the personality, the artificial personality construct and basically the core negative ego, or the inner Lucifer, as I like to call it. And on top of that, you get, or mixed up with that, you get any kind of traumas. If the parents have severe traumas, they get transferred partly or 100% to the baby too. On the top of that, a lot of fear and whatnot that these parents hold in their unconscious mind will usually somehow get affecting the baby too. So it adds to layers upon layers on the original separation and rejection trauma. And on top of that again, or mixed together with that, you get the karma you take on from these different parallel or simultaneous incarnations, both past, present, and future, that the higher mind is facilitating. But the good news is that you also get gifts and talents from these incarnations, not only in negative karma, but you usually get some of that too, mixed into everything. So this whole creates a big clusterfuck at the center of your being, which becomes the negative ego stronghold. And in addition to that, or on top of that, if the child or the baby growing up as a young child gets any kind of traumatic experiences from the parents or whatever, that gets added to like another layer and another problem and another psychosis or neurosis or trauma, whatever, in that system, in the hierarchy of the negative ego, which is all hidden in the it's what creates the unconscious mind, basically. Because if you didn't have traumas, you wouldn't need an unconscious mind at all. It's created because the baby and the child cannot handle these negative energies and these traumas, so it has to store them to eventually process them out later if you go that path. So this creates a pretty strong darkness stronghold, and then you have the rest of your upbringing and you're growing up until you're 18 or something like that, adds layers upon layers on that hierarchy negative structure. And that eventually becomes your personality makeup for the physical incarnation as you become an adult. And it also gives you a level of consciousness and a vibration or a frequency, basically, which again becomes the destiny you attract, unless you decide to do something about it. And most people haven't done that. They have just gone through life, become what they become, and then they just attract the destiny that they do based on this personality makeup. And they feel many times like victims because they can't understand why they attract so much negativity in their lives and feel bad. But it's all because of these traumas and this negative ego complex. And so basically your full consciousness is split up. So the most of your consciousness, of your light, of your beingness is being projected through all these negative layers of the negative ego, which again becomes projected onto the physical world and attracts and becomes your life and how you behave and what you say and what you do and how you feel about yourself. And then you have a little part of your consciousness, the tip of the iceberg of your consciousness, of your full consciousness, is sort of free to be used to actually dismantle this big onion of negativity. And most people haven't done that for a long time in this planet, so the corruption has kept building like it usually always do, because it's transferred from parents to the child, even unknowingly, and then the child does the same to its children, and it goes on. It goes until it keeps building and building because nobody's doing the inner work. So it comes to a head at some point where all this negativity is too much. So we basically, as a collective, we decide to destroy ourselves and start all over again in a new cycle. And this has happened many times, as I talk about in my other video called The History of Mankind. So that's how it works. The darkness wants to spread and perpetuate itself, and it does that in unconscious moments, and even just basically wirelessly by emitting negative energies to the offspring of that you get. And then you have the whole thing echoing through eternity. So the slightest negative issue in one person or one kid can echo through eternity for so many lifetimes that is unbelievable. Because then everybody was traumatized. It takes a victim to create a victim. So if you're victimized, you become an abuser many times, and then you create another victim, and it all goes down to eternity because there is nothing. That's how the whole everything works. Things has to balance themselves out according to the rules of the game, and the rule is that you have to do the inner work to actually get back in balance. And many people on this planet haven't done that for a long time, so we are coming to a head with a lot of negativity coming to the surface collectively this time. But luckily we have all these volunteers who have come from higher levels to take on a lot of the karma and transmute it and keep the mass consciousness high enough for not to self-destruct this time. So we can actually go through the chaos and all the madness and the karmic insanity and get out on the other side, at least some of us, or the people who have done or are doing the work, and actually ascend into a different level. But mostly the karma you have to care about is your personal karma, which is lodged in your unconscious mind and thus projected out, and it becomes your life. And if you don't do anything, you're stuck in a certain karmic groove. You just go around that karmic groove and get the same problems. You hit your head into the same brick wall again and again because you don't learn, which many people do their whole life. Or you start to use life as it was meant to be used, as a mirror to reflect back and point out where your issues are, so you can actually start to dismantle them and work them out and heal them in yourself. And this is called the path of self-empowerment, or the spiritual path, or the hero's journey up the scale of consciousness. And the best way to do that is to act on your highest excitement, because that's a signal from your higher mind. This is the path that's right for you. And within that path, it's automatically will bring up everything you need to face to find back to your true center. So if you just follow your highest excitement with zero insistence on what the outcome should be, because you can be excited about becoming, a famous musician, but that might not be what serves you, but it might serve you for, 1 year or two, that you follow that passion, and then suddenly you take a completely different turn. Instead of becoming a famous musician, but you become something completely different, or you move on. Because if you're on the fast track to enlightenment, you cannot have an ambition that is worldly like that. You have to use everything as a stepping stone. Every excitement is just a way to guide you through the labyrinth of your mind to get out of it. Because if you want to actually become a famous musician, that will, you can try to do that, but then you're overriding how the formula works, how things work, because you have to be able to drop everything on a dime, basically, and move on to the next higher excitement when it comes. And this is what I've done in my life. I wanted to become, a writer, an author, and famous author and whatnot, which was my big passion when I was a student and I was young. But I was ready to drop all that when it felt ready, and it felt right to do so, and I moved on to different things, and it's been like many stepping stones along the way, complete, big turns in life that completely moved me away from what used to be a passion. Doesn't mean you lose those abilities and passions. You can still have fun with it, but it's the problem is if you get caught up in the idea that you want to take it to the end exactly like that. That's the problem, because then you get caught in worldly ambitions, and that will definitely slow you down on the path to enlightenment, because you need to be able to sacrifice your own son, like Abraham. That's allegorical, of course, but you need to be able to sort of do crazy stuff and go crazy directions. If it feels right, if it's your highest and newest passion, even if it means dropping everything you thought was you before. So you basically change. It's like a snake shedding its old skin. You have to be able to shed your skin many times on the path, most likely at least. So karma, the personal karma is both for your own challenge and also to benefit the collective, because everybody who's doing this inner work is also benefiting not only the collective but also the soul group, or everybody has like a soul group of people they have lifetimes with many times, and they play different roles. And if you act on your highest excitement and these things, you will benefit the whole soul group, because that's what everybody has agreed upon before incarnation. So you benefit yourself, you benefit the soul group, or whatever group you're part of. That could be physical family group and more eternal soul groups. And you also benefit the whole collective of the whole planet if you actually do clean up your own unconscious like this. And that's the only way to actually benefit the whole planet. You can try to do good in the outside world, like many people do. They're misled to do that because it makes them feel superficially good. They can see themselves as good people. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it doesn't really, unless it's actually your passion. But if you're doing it with the motive or the intention of, the hidden intention or agenda of feeling good about yourself because you want to feel good instead of actually doing the work, then it's not really beneficial in the bigger picture of things. So the most beneficial thing you can do for yourself, for everybody every people you in your soul group and whatnot, and the collective, the whole of humanity, is to actually clean up your own mess and act on your highest excitement, go that path, the self-empowerment. That is the best you can do. So the individual karma is the most important to focus on, because obviously you cannot do anything about the fact that you're in a certain stream, life stream or timeline stream for this planet with a collective that is doing, going through what is going through. That is not something you can do anything about after you actually have come here, after you have agreed to be born into it. That is just how it will be. But in that stream, in that crazy life stream, you can float or sink individually by doing your own inner work. That makes a big difference. So you're not a victim of those circumstances or that life stream, because each person can experience almost the same situation very differently. You can have some people can completely sink from the same experience, while other people benefit from it because they know how to use life as a reflection instead of feeling like a victim. So definitely you can sink, or you can swim, or you can float, depending on how you handle things and how much understanding you have and how conscious you are. So those are the basic three levels: individual karma, group karma, and the collective karma. And you also have something that's called instant karma, which I guess could be kind of unique to this situation, this life, this graduation life we have now, because it helps keep people on the right track very rapidly. So if you sort of do something, or you move in a direction that's not beneficial for your path, the higher mind will give you very strong instant karma feedback that no, this is not the best direction, or this is not a good direction for you. So instead of you actually, normally you might collect that karma and gather it and accumulate it, and then you have to face it, work through it in some different lifetime. But that's not the case in this life, because this life is the life we are supposed to graduate into galactic citizenship, basically, or intergalactic citizenship, because we have been kind of isolated on this planet for eons of time as a collective, trying to work out all the karmic issues, but ending in cataclysms before, and this time it's supposed to not end in cataclysm. And it doesn't look like it's going to be, but since we're going through all the chaos now, and it doesn't look that bad. So it looks pretty good actually, when you think about it. But that's why I think they have invented, or the instant karma thing is just to avoid people accumulating karma, because that would not be beneficial. You have to face everything this life. You're not here to accumulate more karma. You're here to get rid of it, and instant karma helps you in that sense. And it's becoming very obvious these days. If you look at the collective, you can see very clearly that the majority of people, they are not individualized. They're run by the collective consciousness, which is basically what is called the physical mind. Not the individual physical mind, but the physical mind of the whole planet. So each individual is like a node in that, like a network, and a node that feeds into that physical mind, that collective consciousness. And the collective consciousness cannot help but contain the same amount of darkness and light, basically, or that each individual node contributes. Although light is a lot stronger than darkness, or high vibration, a high level of consciousness is a lot more effective and more powerful than low vibrations. But still, each individual contributes to the collective physical or global mind. So the global mind also has like a negative ego, a collective negative ego, a shadow side, which has been dominating for a long time now, basically the whole of history and before that. And this is what I call the collective negative ego, or the collective Lucifer. And it's physically or mechanically, it consists of these archon beings, which schizophrenics can actually perceive directly from the voices they hear in their mind, or through their mind. So these beings, I've talked about this in a video called The Truth About Schizophrenia and Archons. You can check that out. But basically that's the foot soldiers of this collective shadow, and it's always extremely negative. And these archons are really trying to gaslight anybody they can, and hold anybody they can back from ascending and increasing the level of consciousness. It's basically the adversary, or what some people refer to as the devil. It's a real thing. It's just not a person. It's a collective swarm or entity of hive mind entity that exists in the fourth density, basically the astral planes, where you go when you dream and whatnot. That's where these entities exist, these archon that makes up the collective negative ego. And they feed upon the negativity and whatnot, and they're trying to create as much negativity as possible to maintain their food source and their crop. So they're basically, it's like the Matrix. You are like a battery or a food source for these machine-like entities who will do and say anything to gaslight people onto the negative path and make people do negative stuff and whatnot. And the schizophrenics are just special cases that are sort of glitch in the matrix, or that they actually can perceive them much more clearly, because they have broken, somehow their armor has been broken, so these beings can come really close, most likely because the schizophrenics have severe trauma, or they have abused drugs like methamphetamine in severe quantities, and that can also create like a hole in their spiritual armor, or what you want to call it. So which allows these beings to come very close, so they can basically talk like, entities and voices in people's head. But they always try to pretend that they are your thoughts. They don't want to be seen as different than you. So many schizophrenics don't even know that these beings are different. They think that they themselves are thinking like that. But many also understand that these entities are different than them, and they just don't understand how to deal with that. But that's another story, really. That's not really, but that's the adversary. That is always constantly working to hold people back and trip people up, and that's what you are working against, or you're using those entities to they will point out your weaknesses in different ways by attacking those weaknesses through other people. People will attack you, or they will trigger people to attack you in different ways, which exposes your weaknesses. So if you use those attacks to heal those traumas that they are attacking, or these blind spots and whatnot, then you're actually using life in a clever way that they cannot do anything about, because their attacks become your way to heal and your way up the scale. And there is even a guy who was schizophrenic because he took methamphetamine, and there's a link to this interview with him in the video I made about it. You can check it out, and he actually understood this. So he managed to get rid of these voices by two things. He didn't allow them to isolate him from other people like they want to do, so they can gaslight you and make you more paranoid and generate more fear. So he basically just told everybody about it, all his friends and family, just constantly told them what these beings are saying to him, even though it's very negative. He didn't care. Then you can just laugh about it. It's just ridiculous, right? So it takes the edge off the whole situation. So that really helped. He just was open about it, and he also used the attacks. They try to attack you and bring up stuff from the past and make you feel shame and whatnot. And he just used that to actually heal those issues that they touched upon. And eventually the voices completely left, and he was able to heal himself, which is is a really an interesting interview. I recommend you check out. There should be a link in the video called The Truth About Archons and Schizophrenia. A pinned link down below. So karma is more complicated. It's not some god sitting there like meeting out, this karma and this person and this, you did this and that. It's not that simple, because you're taking on karma, because life is going on all the time. All the frames in the DVD of the universe and the multiverse are already in existence. They always exist like frames in the DVD. And there are always beings going through all these frames. None of the frames are unused. So most people are run by the collective. And then you have, special people who incarnate for different reasons. A regular person on Earth, like a regular life, just have a job, doesn't move much up or down the scale of consciousness. They still serve a purpose as, part of the collective, and that they have a job to do both in the physical world and just representing a certain level of consciousness as a rung on the ladder, basically. Because you need all the levels represented. But not everybody, far from everybody, has, are incarnating to live that kind of life where you go to extremes and go down and up the scale of consciousness to extremes. That is not always the case for many people. And these kind of people, they just, like regular people, they just live life in a very unconscious way, like automatic. They still have a personality, like a thin layer of personality on top of that. But more or less, they're run by the collective consciousness. That's why they all have similar meanings, and they think in a similar way about all that's happening and all these things. You see it especially among the leftists these days, because that's a certain level of consciousness which is pretty low. So not everybody is bound for enlightenment or even have that as a purpose. Far from it, especially on this planet. But many people do these days because of the ascension. But you need a collective. You need a lot of people to just do all sorts of jobs. Imagine if every single person was going crazy seeking enlightenment, like in my life, for example. If everybody was like me, there would be nobody to do the laundry or serve people in restaurants or do anything, basically, because they would be so busy acting on the highest excitement and going crazy in all sorts of directions that that wouldn't work. So you need like a bulk of people who just have a regular life not super conscious and just go through that, that's also an experience that's highly valuable for, you can have a good life or a not so good life, but it's still an experience. You don't have to become or go for enlightenment to have like a life. It's not for everybody. It's extreme, and it also only for mature souls, basically, who already have been through a lot. So that's something to think about. But the point is that you need that kind of collective to have a system that actually works when it comes to meting out the karma, which is why Earth is so effective, because we have all the levels represented in such a chaotic and massive and an insane way. So you can handle, or you can pack in a lot of karmic stuff in one life quite easily, because there's so many variants and so much. Basically everything from the lowest to the highest is represented at all times. And so the collective is consisting of at these days it's actually a little bit more positive than negative, but it used to be much more negative than positive. And each person, depending on the level of consciousness, that's basically determines how much you're run by the collective and how much you have individualized. So if you're below 330 on the scale of consciousness, that corresponds to 330 corresponds to 50% integrated or positive. So if you're below that, and especially if you're way below that, you're most likely not going to be part of the whole ascension, because you're too low and you cannot reach that level in this life, so you're going to have to do it another way. But those who are 50% positive or more, those are going to be the people who are being basically shaved off as the parallel realities split, or the parallel Earths split apart more and more. Those who are above 50% integrated and positive, 330 on the scale of consciousness, they will be shaved off and ascending on the Earth, the version of Earth that is will become the golden age Earth, which will have ET contacts and ET help and assistance once we have gone through this chaos. So this chaos is basically when we are birthing. It's like the cramps, or it's like a birthing process. The phoenix bird is crashing to the ground, and a new one is resurrected as the ascending Earth. And you will be on the Earth that you have matching frequencies with, and being around 330 or those levels is good enough to be part of the ascending parallel reality split, basically. So we are basically being harvested. It's the great harvest, and it's basically like being shaved off as many as possible. Obviously, it's they want to free as many beings as possible at this time, but many people will not be able to, and they will either die physically or just disappear somehow from your life eventually, or as things progress. And I guess in the next 10 years we're going to see a massive acceleration. In the coming 10 years there's going to be a massive acceleration in this process, which we are starting to see now already. And when 10 years have passed, like in around 2033 or something, we probably have a very different civilizations, those of us who are ascending to a new, and we will have a lot of ET assistance and technologies as we clean up the mess and all the pollution and all the stuff that we have done to the planet basically needs to be cleaned up. But that's not a problem with the technology that we have, the ETs can assist us with. We just need to go through this period of chaos as we are birthing the new paradigm first, because that's how we cleanse out all the karma, and we basically see who is ready for the new paradigm and who is not. That we are in the middle of that decision right now. So this is a major ending of a major karmic cycle that can be traced all the way back to the Orion Empire in millions of years ago, which I talk about in the History of Mankind video. So karma is not just one little thing. It's quite complex and massive, and it functions on many different levels, and probably a lot more than I can cover in this video too, and more than I would know. But that's basically what my take on it and what I can say about it at this point. And I think things are going to get really interesting at least in the next 2-3 years, because the chaos has to play out a little bit before we can start actually giving completely birth to the new. Right now the old is being broken down in a massive and major way, but at some point in the middle of this we will start to accelerate in a completely new direction, and we will start to give birth to a completely new paradigm, and that's when the fun finally will start.